Welcome back to New Rockstars News. Today we are talking all things Venom, and we're also going to cover a couple big Star Wars stories, Daredevil Season 3 trailer, and more. Guys, joining me here at this table are Sam Bashor and Filup Molina.
Hey! Thanks for having me.
The rhythm's going to get you. Maud Garrett, of course, is busy living her best life in New York Comic Con.
Jelly.
Oh, man, she's meeting all kinds of cool people.
Picture of J-Lo.
Well, it's not at Comic Con.
Yeah. And Ryan Gosling. Oh, she's great.
That's super cool. She got to go to where the rockets sleep.
Super. All right, well, let's get to our main story. Of course, this week, Venom. The movie is here, and the reviews are in, and everyone's got a take on this. I thought we would actually take it piece by piece today. Oh, and heads up for you guys, it's going to be a spoiler review. We're going to talk about the full movie, beginning, middle, and end, although those things are kind of hard to distinguish in this movie. But, you know, there's a lot of good things going on with this movie. I don't want it to be too one-sided. It's never too one-sided. Just so you know, this is going to be a kind of review where we're all hating on it or we're all just like loving it. We try to have a more nuanced view. But let's talk about the script of this movie, the story. What did we think about the story structure, the characters? How well did they adapt the comic story into the movie that we saw on screen?
I think the premise of trying to take a character that relies so heavily on a hero for their backstory and making them their own thing is a cool experiment that they didn't quite nail, but the bones of that idea are good. What you see in this movie, the idea that, since there's spoilers, the idea that there's an invasion force, you get the buddy cop movie, but the cops are one person, and like that's a fun idea, and it's Upgrade, but Upgrade did the idea better of the Possession movie.
Upgrade did executed so much better on this this Possession kind of thing, or a passenger that's riding along with you and like kind of communicating with you. You guys should watch Upgrade, by the way, because it executes a lot of the things that this movie actually doesn't. So what's really interesting is I'm glad you brought that up, because Upgrade is a much smaller film, right? It does not have those global stakes. It's not talking about the end of the world and potentially bringing a bunch of other Upgrade chips on board or something. And yet the stakes feel so like high, and you're constantly like, oh my god, it's is he gonna lose? And like every moment of that movie feels worse than the moment before. And I feel like structurally, and I do think this is a script issue, it didn't feel like anything was like that big a deal. Like, weren't there like 5 characters in this entire movie? You know what I mean?
It felt pretty small.
Yeah, especially considering they're going to space and they're going to bring back all these things. And he's like, I'm literally going to fly this whole thing by myself.
In 5 minutes, it's a rocket's launching and no one, it's like it's nothing. It doesn't matter at all.
Right. Yeah. And when he does that chop across like the whole room, I'm also like, nah, I don't even buy that the computer is going to turn on. Like, that you're going to fly a rocket?
Yeah. You're right. There were some escalation issues with this movie. I want to get this out of the way. This does not deserve a 29 or 30% of Rotten Tomatoes. This is too low. That site is too much of a binary aggregate of it's not a fair representation of the movie.
Well, because if you give it a 4 out of 10, you essentially give it a 0.
Yeah, or if you give it a C+, they'll weigh it down sometimes. But I think there are some escalation issues and some structural issues with this movie. This really does feel like a movie that was found in the edit, right? Like, we do know that at one point this movie was aiming to be R-rated.
Right, which Upgrade was, and that also makes everything much more visceral.
Yeah, this does feel like a kind of movie that the director and the editor and everyone I think who worked on this movie, from the writers to the cast to the director, are all very competent, skilled, creative people. Yeah. I just think at some point there was some kind of mixed messaging from the studio on what kind of movie they wanted to make. And unfortunately, you can see there are big chunks of this movie that are kind of tonally inconsistent. And there are times where they really stretch out I feel like the first act of the movie, where they kind of start the movie before the movie begins and kind of show you stuff that should just be prologue, maybe explained away in exposition. We don't need to see all these events. And there are times
I honestly think had we not seen that, we would have all fallen asleep in that first act.
Maybe.
Because those things introduced a question for us of when is that going to come into play? Because I was checking in constantly, and I was like, man, this is way later than I ever would have expected. We still haven't, he hasn't even been exposed yet to the not symbiote, by the way. Did you notice they re-edited that and changed it to symbiote?
Real smart.
Yeah. Very smart. But he's not even exposed to it till it's more than half an hour into the movie. So we needed that little bit of that little J. Jonah Jameson's son reference at the beginning in order to care about that at all.
I think the way you should have probably started the movie, this movie is a lot similar to, in some aspects, to The Mask, where it's like there's a supernatural element that like it's taken over someone's body, it's bringing out different elements of them, and they don't have control over it.
It's got a funny tongue.
Yeah, funny tongue. Funny tongue. But and also we get the mask in the first 10 minutes of that movie. Right. We don't get this until what feels like halfway through. It might not be, but it feels like it for how slow this movie
And
is.
the way they reveal it is by Tom Hardy looking at his reflection in the car window. Like,
Well,
there's
they're
no
trying
big
to like
reveal
do
moment.
the whole, like you don't see the shark until an hour into the movie or whatever, and it's like you don't see the venom until you know, an hour in.
The shark's not even in the movie until an hour in.
You just hear the shark's voice.
No, I think honestly the way you can kind of tighten up the story, the parts that work, because there's like 3 different movies. You got your superhero movie, that's the end. Then you have the buddy cop funny stuff with Venom, which personally was my favorite stuff, which was right in the middle-ish area. And then in the beginning, it's your super serious, grounded stuff, which I actually really like. The intro where you get the symbiotes coming to Earth, that's cool. And the idea that it's like no one really knows like where the 4th one is, did it die, whatever, it's body hopping. There is
that was actually great too, by the way. The direction on that, like a zombie movie, like a Patient Zero kind of carrier, just like slowly. It reminds me of It Follows, kind of, right? That slow march. I love that.
Yeah, it's super cool. Big flaw with that though. But later, it's but then we go to this whole like scene where we're trying to learn more about Eddie, and we just kind of see that he kind of bungles just his whole life. But I think a way that we could have related to Eddie more and we could have gotten to the more fun stuff and played with Venom more is if you took out the whole, like we got to a point where it said 6 months later. Everything before that could have been 3 lines that happened later where it was I lied to her and I broke into her email, blah, 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 and that's what happened. Don't need to meet his boss. Don't need to meet anybody. It's actually not important. We don't need to know that he has a relationship with Carlton Drake or even see that how bad of a reporter he is.
Right.
He's really bad. But if you just jump to him getting infected and you kind of find out from there, like you unravel it from there, I think we would have spent more time getting to know the actual character in this movie that we came for, which was Venom. We don't no one
what's
cares about
fascinating
Eddie.
is that in every other version that we've seen Venom show up, I'm talking about like in movies and animated films and comics or whatever, you actually don't meet Eddie Brock much earlier than when he's about to get venomed. Like, and he's always down on his luck, right? He's having the worst day of his life. But we don't really need to super establish how high he was first, right? He doesn't need to have his own primetime Rachel Maddow type show.
Yeah.
Like you can just have him on his worst day, and then he gets covered in goo.
Yeah. Well, that's why
as one does.
Yeah, that's what I mean by when I think this movie was found in the edit, right? Like Tom Hardy said that his favorite 40 minutes were cut out of this movie. I'm dying to see that movie.
Okay, so you say that, and I read through like a bunch of other articles that were breaking down like what could that mean? Like honestly, because like 40 minutes is an insane amount of footage to just be what could it possibly be?
R-rated action and violence.
Maybe
or potentially a full sequence.
Because I'm telling you, there are parts when this movie's second act breaks into 2. And I'm talking about the part of the movie where Anne Wayne comes in and there's a female Venom and she kisses him. That whole part of the movie, there was so much that was told and not shown. Whereas the first act of the movie, there was so much that was shown that didn't need to be shown that could have been told. Right? Like that whole everything before 6 months later. But at the end of the movie, we need to know exactly why Venom chooses Eddie. What about Eddie's personality is unique?
He's also a loser.
He's also a loser. It was a quick joke that I laughed at, but like those are critical things that I believe in this footage that Tom Hardy's referring to. We saw some super violent sequences where Eddie and Venom realized that they kind of like working together, and that is what we were going to see we led into the final.
Upgrade, the symbiote, essentially, in Upgrade is a means to an end, right? He has a purpose that he needs to fulfill that he can only do with that help. So it's like, you know what? While I need to serve this greater purpose, I'm going to give in to these desires. And he's like, I want to take that guy down. Like, he didn't really care that
It would have
much.
been cool
he
if
didn't do it before.
It would have been cool if we did see something similar to Upgrade, where it's like there is a mission, and Venom's like, cool, we'll do this, but then you get to be my like body bag that I can use to like do whatever I want after that. And also like the switch between Venom being good, bad, whatever is super confusing. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. But positives from
real quick, I do want to hear your positives, but I want you to call out what's your beef with the storyline of the.
Why did he change his mind? He said why. Like you said, there was a lot of telling. It's like, but why? Like why? Why did he change his mind?
But your beef with the passing of the.
When the time. So basically, we see. The ambulance worker walk off.
Right.
And then that time change hasn't happened yet. We go over to Eddie and hear his story. She comes to that city and she hops in the old lady. And then we get 6 months later, 8 months later, whatever. And then she gets to the airport. You're saying it took the person who was already in a populated city who ends up later using a vehicle, can't take a vehicle to the airport. It took her 6 months after that point to get to the airport.
That's the 40 minutes of the movie that was cut out. 6
Oh
months as
my
this
God.
old lady.
6 month walk from
just,
Malaysia to
plays
Hong Kong
mahjong.
airport.
Oh my God, that's so
Yeah, there was
long.
layovers.
Yeah, get
That's
delayed.
insane. That made no sense to me personally.
Well, I think we should talk about some positive stuff because I want to talk about the direction and the performances specifically. Because I think within some of these performances, we saw some really shining moments from this movie. So, what do we think about like Tom Hardy, Michelle Williams, Riz Ahmed?
These are great actors, right? And like, it's actually fascinating to see, like, put great actors together in a movie that's not really finding anything too exciting, and they can't save it. But I would say everyone in this was highly watchable, which sounds like a very like low kind of thing to say about a performance, right?
Yeah.
Like I could look at you, but that's why they're all pretty, right? But it actually means that like when they were on screen, I didn't have a desire to like, I wish they'd go back to that other person. Each one of them, I was like happy to hear from them. It's just like great characters in a whatever story.
Yeah, like and Riz Ahmed's character is mustache twirling damsel on a train track kind of villain. Like he's not like there's no like depth besides like global warming and like that. He doesn't say anything else past that. But I like it because he heightened it a little bit, and like I didn't feel a threat from him, but I did enjoy, like you said, I did like seeing him on screen, and I did enjoy the relationship between Anne and Eddie. I did like their relationship. It's not perfect, but yeah, I guess more their chemistry. The relationship I was fine with, but
you can see why Tom Hardy signed on to do this movie because this guy's having no shortage of work. He's one of the most wanted actors in the business, and he can probably do any project that he wants. And Sony was probably thrilled to have him want to do this part. And it's superhero franchise movies is not really Tom Hardy's normal thing, but it's a very interesting role, and he played it very well. I think Tom Hardy's physical performance in this movie and the way that he played that kind of fractured energy of a guy who has like another presence in his mind that he, at one point Venom says, "I'll just consider you my ride," right? And you could see Tom Hardy being like, "I'm basically what I treat my motorcycle as now. I have to be that." So you could see him kind of channel that kind of physical, like he felt like a horse who's never had a human ride him before, and it's just like, what the heck is this? Get off of me! Get off of me!
I like the way describing that.
It's like when you ride a centaur, they're like, "What?"
And I enjoyed his performance a lot. I think I liked him more once Venom showed up, and him like you get him like when he's on the trolley. It's like my favorite moment that I wish they just did more of that physical comedy. They get more of it in the restaurant, but when he's on the trolley, Venom says hungry, and he stands up immediately. He's like, "Oh God damn it!" Like it's like a lot of like he's like it just slips out. He's like, "No, sorry, I'm just gonna stand here until the trolley stops to explain to Venom or whatever." It's just like, "Stop making me do this, please." And his freak out in the restaurant is such a good moment as well, where it's just like he's losing his mind, and I like the way that he portrayed that specifically. And then by the end of the movie, I guess he's healthy, he's fine with everything.
He reached the nice balance.
Well, remember Venom was like, "Don't listen to them, I can fix this." And it's kind of like also telling the audience like, "Don't worry about this thing."
Whenever I hear the word atrophy, I always feel like that's you miss there's no turnaround anymore. Like you're past the point of no return. And they said his heart had, and I was like, all right, whatever. Like it's aliens in there. Maybe alien goop will heal that. I was like, you picked an organ that can't fix normally. I don't know. That bugged me in the movie too. But
if we talk about like the tone set in this movie, I think that was kind of an issue that we're looking for. And I'm not blaming director Ruben Fleischer, who directed Zombieland and a lot of great stuff. He's got a good energy between like horror and comedy. But it felt like this was a movie found in the edit. It felt like the studio interfered a lot in this. And unfortunately, it seems like Sony, as much as they want a strong superhero movie, does not have a Kevin Feige or even what DC and Warner had with Jeff Johns and Zack Snyder.
Avi Arad or whatever his name is.
That name was thrown around a couple.
Yeah, he was all the Spider-Man movies.
But he doesn't have like that kind of balance of like exactly what fans are looking for when it comes to fan service, or maybe doesn't have like he maybe has too much restraint. It all comes down to relationships, and luckily Kevin Feige is head of that studio and like a proven nerd. They just let him do whatever he wants, and he lets the directors kind of have enough control over their movies so it doesn't feel like too much of the same thing. So there's just a nice balance there, and the other studios just haven't lucked into this. I'll even say Fox, before it is merged with Disney, has had a lot of luck by having like Simon Kinberg guide a lot of their superhero movies.
And doesn't nail it every time.
Nail it every time. But I have a feeling that Dark Phoenix will be like the surprise superhero hit that we never thought would ever happen. Simon Kinberg is a guy who pretty much knows what he's doing. I think Days of Future Past was as good as it was because that guy knows exactly, he's the right kind of nerd and he's the right kind of filmmaker. And we just haven't, I mean, we think the last solely produced Sony superhero movie was The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which had a lot of similar problems, I think, that this movie did. I think we just haven't had a lot of good corporate groupthink when it comes to making these movies. It's not just like capturing lightning in a bottle. It requires a lot of like hand-holding and shepherding these projects through.
Well, and that's the problem with the movie, right? Is that you can see that on the screen, right? It's 3 different movies or so, and it's 3 different ideas of how we should do this. Should this be funny? Should this be serious? Should this be scary? Honestly, there were horror elements in that, and honestly, those are the ones I responded to the most.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Did you find the horror elements popped up with Venom being there, or was it prior to him actually appearing?
No, I mean, it was in the directing and in the tone. I actually don't think there were horror elements in the writing of the script, which that could have been interesting, right? Like, imagine if there's a moment where Eddie Brock has been separated from the symbiote and they're in the same room and the lights are off and he's trying to like get out of this building without getting reinfected or something, and like you just know that like it's around somewhere. Like, just elements like that would have been story-wise horror, but in the direction I saw horror that I liked. Obviously, again, with that pacing of, honestly, the whole reason that sequence is there of the other symbiote slowly making its way to San Francisco is because of how boring the first act is. It's like, remember though, something interesting's coming.
Yeah. Did you ever see that movie? I think it's called Fallen. You guys can correct me because you do. It's with Denzel Washington. Yeah, same premise.
Yeah.
It's a demon that transfers via
Sings
touch.
a song.
Yeah.
and then I don't remember what song it was, but yeah.
But there was such a cool moment where there's a chase scene with it, but it doesn't run. It just touches the person next to him, and they touch another person. So you just see like this like circuit go through of a demon jumping bodies. I'm like, man, before this movie came out, I knew that Riot did that. I was like, they got to do something like that. That's got to be awesome, and he didn't.
They like showed a glimpse of like, but we could have.
Yeah, we could have, and that little girl's dead.
We were talking about some of the horror elements, and I think we should move on to talking about the visuals, the aesthetic choices, the cinematography, the CGI. Visually speaking, technically speaking, how did this movie affect
I
you?
actually was, again, split, right? Like, I actually was pleasantly surprised with my feeling about Venom, specifically the way Venom looked. I was a little worried that the sheen on Venom would make it look CGI, that rubbery feel. Instead, it made it feel organic. I actually like the separation right at the eye line with the like essentially the skin, because other interpretations of Venom, it's felt like they're just like painted on, almost like moth wings or something. So there's clearly like a lot of intent there. I really liked it. It seemed muscular and yet inky, sticky, all those things. But that's actually why I also have beef, is that I predicted this the other week. I was like, I really hope there's not a moment where it looks like 2 ink blots just smashing into each other and I can't follow what's happening. And that's the third act.
Yeah.
It felt like when I, as a kid, had 2 different colors of gack, and I'm like, oh, what happens if they mix? And then you realize it's all ruined, and you start crying as you try to separate it, and your mom throws it away and yells at you. Yeah. They cost $4. I don't know why.
Eric, this cost $4!
That really broke our house.
The gack was hers.
I saw this movie. I've seen it twice. You don't have to. And I saw it on a normal screen, a regular movie theater screen that you guys could see it on. And I thought the CGI was actually just fine. There's moments where it's like, what's happening? Mainly like the third act, where it's like there's a lot of like these digital zooms, and it's always like kind of dark, and you're not really sure like what's flying out of who or who's hitting who at this point. And so you're kind of like, I'll just wait till this is done to figure out who lived out of this fight. But I did enjoy. But before then I saw an IMAX and everything looked awful, so that was not a good decision. But before that, I liked the idea of in the final fight of you having the symbiotes fight over the humans, and it looked like they were fighting within.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's kind of cool.
That was very cool.
Even though you couldn't see it, but like the idea of that is really cool.
Well, it did illustrate for a second, like, oh, that one's Riz Ahmed. Yeah, like it was easier to follow actually, but it was an interesting idea that they also had conflict between them as well.
I'm really bummed you didn't see the yellow symbiote or the blue symbiote. We got to see Riot, and Riot, they did make him look more disgusting than Venom, just because it looks like he had scabs all over his body and like he like freshly healed, or not really. But I enjoyed his visualization, but I do like the line where it's like he's got things you've never seen.
Yeah,
it's
like special weapons.
Yeah, it's
that are
big sword, small sword, spikes, ball whiz
Mace.
spikes.
An axe kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could use a more inspired character design, right? If you think like when you watch like the Alien movies, and granted that's like comparing like the ultimate best character design of the xenomorph creature, like you don't need to necessarily understand the logic of the biology of it. That would help. Like, what is the biology of the symbiote? But like when you say it has special weapons, yeah, it'd be more interesting if like that really wowed us. And yeah, it's just you can shapeshift into things that for some reason Venom can't.
Yeah,
right?
it's an inconsistent logic, right, to the visuals. Venom was able to form a fist at one point very clearly and show, like, it wasn't Tom Hardy's hand, it was a larger, big, curled finger fist. And then he also knows everything that Tom Hardy knows. And it's like, does Tom Hardy know any other shape other than umbrella? Like, apparently not, right? Because somehow Riot knows, like, axe and mace and knows all these things. And it's like, Venom can't make that same shape.
But he can make teeth, and because he makes his own teeth come out, and so it's like that's a sharp object. So it doesn't quite follow what happens.
But that I'd be okay with. I guess it all comes down to point of view for me. I want to see the way you see Tony Stark's face when he's inside the Iron Man suit and he's kind of reacting to things that are happening to him. Oh. I want to see what's going on through Eddie Brock's mind, like inside, like he's like, I'm sorry, apologize, and you can see, I don't know, maybe even if you peel away his face and he reacts more to it, it's just you lose that kind of empathy in a lot of the fight sequences when it's just like ink rolling around killing cops. And yes, it looks cool, but like I think and I hate to always go back to the MCU because they did things a specific way. Doesn't mean it's the only right way, but I think you need to have that human element anytime when there's a fight scene. And I mean, I guess you could argue that Hulk, you don't really see him react. The monster just kind of takes over, and that's that. But there wasn't enough like dealing with what Venom does. Well, when he bites off a head, I want to know how people really react to that.
That's exactly what I was thinking. That like if you completely make it that it's Venom when you see Venom on the outside, Eddie Brock is in 0% control, then that means that anything that Venom does doesn't actually matter, because we don't really associate with Venom. We're not necessarily thinking like, Venom is hurt. Venom apparently can't be hurt, right? Aside from a subwoofer. So if they did though make it like Eddie Brock is signing off on these decisions, or he's seeing it happen and he's allowing it to happen, then it's like, you were a cannibal for a second there, dude. Like, these are huge things that you're doing, but they took everything that would be interesting to put a human through and gave it to the alien.
Yeah.
Well, also he ate the whole dude at the end in the convenience store, because when they're leaving, there's nothing there. Yeah.
And if you would think that would be a pretty bloody thing, you could leave a shoe behind. You could leave something to visually convey what happened. This is where I think the studio's like, no, anything that could potentially get us an R rating, take it out. And I think the director's like, all right, fine, we'll just like cobble together whatever we can and make this a decent movie, which I think it is a decent movie.
Initially, it left just a skeleton.
Yeah,
it was very funny.
A dancing skeleton.
Yeah, exactly. And it was the xylophone sound.
So any final thoughts before we move on from this?
It definitely, like been said a couple times here, it definitely doesn't deserve the low score that it has. It's fine. If you want to see the movie, if you had any interest from any of the trailers, go see it. Go ahead, bring some friends. I mean, it'll make it a little bit more fun. The post-credit scenes will make it more worth your while because they are delightful. One of them is specifically. And it's fun. It'll be a fun time for you to watch it.
I think that's about as much as I can say. Is this is a fun popcorn movie, and I actually don't regret having seen it, right? But that doesn't mean that like I'd ever see it again, kind of thing.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
I might regret seeing it twice.
Yeah, one of the common consensuses online is that this movie feels like it was from like the early 2000s.
It reminded me
of
the energy
movies.
of Blade.
Yeah, honestly. And I think if this movie came out around the same time Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie, I don't think I would have minded. It would have felt like, oh, cool, another character with cool effects. But the thing is, the genre has evolved, right? Like we've seen what Marvel's been able to do, and even like some of the bold choices with like Deadpool and Logan and the other. So I would even say like Zack Snyder's made some very bold choices with his movies, and the game has changed. You got to bring something new to the table. You can't just go back and be like, I will tell a fairly straightforward PG-13 superhero movie with some decent effects. You gotta make a statement with
and
it.
The balance has to be there, right? The dark themes and the comedy are nailed in some movies, and this is a movie where we felt like we saw three movies.
Yeah. Well, let us know what your thoughts about this. Are we being too? I don't think we're being too hard or too generous. I think
are we being too nice on the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's hear your nuanced thoughts in the comments below, because there's a lot to talk about. And yeah, we mentioned the post-credit scene. We did another video breaking down the post-credit scenes in case you have any questions about that. And look forward to more discussion about Venom on this channel going forward. I do want to look into what was Tom Hardy's cut of this movie, or at least the 40 minutes. I'm very curious to see the deleted scenes of this movie, and maybe there'll be an Ultimate Edition that will show us this stuff. But for now, let's move on to our trivia question, which we have back here. So as I read the question, let's just disperse these. Okay, in the comics, there are 9 named symbiotes, including Venom. Name as many as you can. Ooh. Okay, all of our answers are in the blue bin, and as always, we'll reveal the answer at the end of this video, and the winner will get to her goodbyes. The loser will have to do something agonizingly terrible that we'll get to. But for now, let's move into some other news this week. Sam.
Please and thank you. The Daredevil Season 3 trailer dropped this week. It's an official full-length trailer, and I'm going to give you guys a little baby breakdown, if I may. Starting with number 1, Daredevil holding the cross. It's the opening scene for the trailer. This is actually based on a very popular Marvel Knights cover of Daredevil, where Marvel Knights is kind of like the more adult, where Marvel Max is like super violent. This is like a little bit tamer. Next, why the costume looks different. I actually found in the Born Again story, which Season 3 looks like it's based on, during his recovery, Matt, while he's in the Convent, thank you. Oof, all over the place. He goes into the basement. He actually cobbles together a costume, and this is the TV show's version of that after what's happened with the Defenders. Also, I want to point out Fisk's white suit, which is more comic accurate. Everyone wanted to see Vincent D'Onofrio in that trademark white suit. It seems like he's being born again after he's getting out of prison after making that plea deal.
Metaphorically born again.
Yeah. And next, it seems pretty clear that Kingpin knows that Daredevil and Matt Murdock are the same person. You actually see them at one point talking to each other in a bar without looking at each other, which is kind of fun. And in the comic Born Again, Wilson Fisk is aware that Matt and Daredevil are the same person, which is really interesting. So they're really diving into that story. Also, I don't know how Kingpin actually makes it out of this season if he does know the identity of Matt Murdock. We'll have to see. Also, some other people's fates are up in the air. But next, having someone dress up as Daredevil to kind of, disgrace his image and whatnot, that's actually from Born Again as well. In that comic, Kingpin hires just a mental patient to run around with him. Shockingly, I don't think we're going to see that in this TV show. But also, we've seen Bullseye, who has been confirmed to be this character, dress up as Daredevil in the Dark Avengers run, which is a really cool comic book run. But next, Bullseye has been confirmed for this show, and in this series, his alias has been confirmed to be Benjamin Poindexter, which is my favorite alias from the comics. It's great. He will never stand out in the crowd. But I also want to point out this scene where he's holding the gun up is actually based on another Daredevil comic cover, which is very cool. It was pointed out by Reddit user GIF95. But finally, this is like the big thing that I pulled from this trailer. The other Daredevil, Bullseye, we see him at one point in the New York Bulletin, which is the newspaper that Karen Page works for, and also famously in the comics, Bullseye is killed Karen Page. That's one of his big no-no moments in comics, so I don't think she's going to be making out of this season. But are you guys excited? You're getting double the Daredevil. There's no Elektra maybe this season, and you're getting a lot more Wilson Fisk compared to Season 2. Did you guys all watch Season 2?
Yes.
Of Daredevil? So what are you thinking? How are you feeling?
I'm excited. I think this is of the different Marvel Netflix shows, Daredevil's the one that seems to have the most like tonal consistency. Like it knows exactly what the voice of the show is supposed to be, and I think the actor and the direction. I'm actually a really big fan of D'Onofrio, and I think the Born Again series is really the best place to go. Everyone's been trying to do a Daredevil in a Born Again style, right? Like from the first one, they're like, oh, we're going to use Born Again as the inspiration here. It's kind of like the seminal Daredevil series, that and like the Punisher relationship. And I think what's really good about going this way with using the alternate version of Daredevil, the doppelganger as Bullseye, what's really good is I hope that they just like use it as only explore Bullseye as his relationship with Daredevil is. I think that was really good about what the MCU did with Winter Soldier. Like they could have explored the Winter Soldier more, but really it was about the relationship between Bucky and Steve. And I think if we can just get the relationship between these characters of Daredevil, have to deal with like a non-Daredevil, bizarro version of him. I think that's the thing that has me most excited.
Same. And also look at that jawline on that boy right there. That's insane. That's crazy. This guy
sharp.
He's probably gonna like sharpen a little paperclip on there and kill somebody with it.
I'll just add real quick that one of the reasons I'm excited. It's a little bit of a sad reason, but I don't know how much longer these Netflix Marvel shows are going to last with the Disney streaming service coming soon, and with the downhillness of their viewership since Iron Fist. So I point at you because you look like Danny Rand. Hello. But I think that means they're going to leave it all out there, right? They're just going to like put everything into this season and just like balls to the wall, and that I'm really excited for.
Same. No, with Luke Cage and Iron Fist, because those have been the most recent Netflix series that we've been able to see, they seem to be going more like balls to the wall, where it's like Luke Cage, they take their character to a point where it's like, if Luke can't get hurt by anything. What actually happens to a person's character if you can't be challenged by anyone? And that's interesting. Iron Fist, you open up the goodie bag of all the history you can go into. And with Daredevil, it's like, do the story that everyone wants you to do, that all of you have wanted to do for so long. So I'm excited for that. Also, I'm excited to see how Bullseye gets his hands on this costume, because it could be a cool showdown between Gladiator, who made the costume for Matt, and Matt. I think there's going to be a cool coming at each other.
Yeah. Well, let us know in the comments below what you're most excited about from this trailer, and what, tell us how you think the whole direction of these TV shows should go. Should the DC or the Disney streaming service continue them, or are we looking for like an out point? Thanks everybody. But now let's move on to another topic, some Star Wars news.
Obviously we've talked about this a number of times now on this channel, but the fact that ObiWan and Boba Fett spin-offs are now officially canceled. That's the first time that we can report that. I should say that they've been kind of rumors still, but it really sounds like it's finally dead. Basically, you guys remember that Disney's plan was to release one Star Wars film every year forever, so for the next 5 years, because that's how long we have left. They were going to do one big saga release and then anthology stories or Star Wars stories the next year, so on, and then Solo happened.
Right.
And big bummer, right? I mean, and like, it's not their faults either, right? We can actually attest, if you go look at our view counts, we were able to see there's this sharp dip whenever we talked about Solo. We just noticed that we were like, this is not boding well for these movies. Also, weirdly, there's this Variety article about Kathleen Kennedy, and in it, there's just this crazy quote that makes no sense. Hopefully you guys can figure this out. As of right now, no one has been able to decipher what they meant, if this is a typo or what, but the quote is that now Kathleen Kennedy's attention is going to be directed toward a new core trilogy, beginning with Star Wars Episode 9, directed by J.J. Abrams.
Beginning with that movie?
Beginning with the next Star Wars movie, which is the final one of this trilogy that we're in. That's the quote. She's going to be focusing on this new trilogy that starts with this movie.
The D.B. Weiss and Benioff one is starting after that trilogy begins, because they're supposed to be doing their own trilogy, right?
Yeah.
Well,
and that's still on the docket.
Or is it just a mistake?
Maybe it's just a typo.
Honestly, did she mean Episode 10? Being directed by J.J. or the new the Rian Johnson trilogy, right?
Oh, he's got one too.
So first of all, I don't know if you guys have you waiting to unlock what the hell this means. Sam looks like he knows, but also I actually want to finally, since we're pretty much here now, these movies that people have been asking for since honestly the original Star Wars movies, the spin-offs that have always been pitched, right? Like, we'd love to see more about Obi-Wan. We'd love to see Boba Fett. Boba Fett was probably the one I'd heard about the most for the longest time. They're officially dead. Do you guys care? How do you feel?
Well, I mean, we're getting there was some talk of a new Star Wars series coming out about The Mandalorian, which we'll talk about later.
But specifically not about Boba Fett.
But not about Boba Fett. So I think my interest for learning more about Mandalorians and bounty hunters and whatnot, I think I'm okay. I am bummed specifically not learning more about Boba Fett, because I have not gone and read every single comic and every single Legends and every single thing to know what other adventures are out there for that character. And Obi-Wan, with the teases of possibly Ewan McGregor coming back, of course I wanted to see more of him. He was my favorite part of the original series. That and Jar Jar. Yeah,
I think Disney in general is kind of pumping the brakes on the Star Wars franchise. Bob Iger even said, maybe I rushed out too much too fast. And it's not just Solo. I think there was a mix between fan dip and enthusiasm after The Last Jedi, despite how profitable that movie was, and then going into Solo. I don't think that Solo necessarily was a bad movie. I don't think it deserved to have this thing of it killed the Star Wars franchise and killed anthology movies. I think maybe rather than saying these are canceled, I think Disney should just play it safe and just be we're just gonna shelf it for
later,
now.
right? Same thing happened with New Mutants, right? It kept getting pushed back again and again and again and again, and then it came out. Oh no!
I'm so glad. It was my favorite movie of the year.
But they could have just done that, right? It's just on the side now or whatever. But no, they're kind of making it seem no, you guys didn't show up to Solo. We're taking this away from you.
And it might be an investor thing too. They're trying to reassure investors and just say J.J. Abrams is going to direct the Episode 9 and just wait until that comes out and then we can make new announcements. But we still have yet to see what happens with the Rian Johnson trilogy. That's something they've been kind of quiet about.
But speaking of Mandalorian, first I'll say I actually feel like the Mandalorian race has has identified itself as very interesting throughout all the different interpretations, and honestly, like, has become maybe more. There's stories that are more interesting than Boba Fett's story, so I actually think for me it scratches that itch. But specifically about the Mandalorian,
yeah, we got some other news this week. An update from some stuff that's happening with that Jon Favreau's new series on the DC, or I keep saying DC, Disney streaming service.
Yeah, because you think streaming starts with a C.
Right. Yeah. In my language it does. And it's going to be called The Mandalorian. And he on Instagram posted an actual synopsis that sounds really great. So it's after the stories of Jango and Boba Fett, another warrior emerges in the Star Wars universe. The Mandalorian is set after the fall of the Empire and before the emergence of the First Order. We follow the travails of a lone gunfighter in the outer reaches of the galaxy, far from the authority of the New Republic. So just to give you some background on Mandalorians, they're like a super commando warrior people from the planet Mandalore. And if you watch Clone Wars, the animated series, you see Mandalorians are characters in there. They're most famous for their armor. So like Boba Fett uses Mandalorian armor. Enfys Nest uses a Mandalorian armor. It's like the T-shaped helmet. And they kind of like their armor, either from fallen warriors, ends up getting taken by other warriors and worn. So Boba Fett is the clone. Jango and Boba Fett were on Kamino, but Boba Fett was like a clone of him and then later adopted his father's Mandalorian helmet.
He kept the head in there.
He kept the head in there. He just kind of smushes it down, wears it like a mask now. So what do we think? Are we excited? Does this sound like a good idea? And is this like, do we feel like there's enough new ground to fill out a full like 100-episode series of this between these events?
Absolutely, because this thing is going to be covering a lot of the canceled movies, right? It's going to be like everything that's between there is probably Jon Favreau's territory now. It'll have Jungle Book stuff in there. It's going to be great.
A Lion King as well. Elf. There's a lot of good stuff in there. No, this is such a cool premise that I'm like, oh, I'm on board. Of course I'm getting the Disney app. You think I have any self-control? Of course I'm going to get it.
Of course we're all getting it.
We're all getting it.
Of course we are.
You think you're stupid?
It's going to be $100 a month. I'm going to pay it happily.
I'm going to just keep watching Dumbo over and over again. Live action, then animated. Then live action, then animated. No, this show seems amazing. Also, look at how just clean cut that costume is. It's amazing. And I'm excited that they're like, and we're not going anywhere near the Empire. Who cares? Let's go do something else. Right. Please, can we learn about new things in these movies, in this show? And that's exciting. Jon Favreau does a really good job with characters and making you relate to not just the main character, but what they mean to everyone else around them. So who is his band of people going to be?
Right, exactly.
Or is he like a Bruce Banner in the Incredible Hulk's like TV show where he just went town to town to town and like and that's maybe what he's doing. He's just doing like not odd jobs there. He's murdering people, but like
well, they're odd.
They're odd, yeah. But like I think that's such a cool premise for a show, and the directors that they've already teased for this show are so cool that like per episode they've teased like Deborah Chow, who worked a lot on Jessica Jones. I know you guys were excited about a
Taika
couple.
Waititi
is going to do it. Fukunaga, I think, is doing it as well.
Especially for me, as soon as I saw Taika, I wasn't actually thinking immediately Thor Ragnarok. I was thinking, oh man, this could be like Firefly with murder.
Yeah,
ooh, that's cool.
Which I would love.
And Bryce Dallas Howard as well as one of the other directors they teased. But Jon Favreau is going to he's going to obviously be directing like the pilot and like the finale or whatever, and he's going to have his hands in this. And I think just like there's something super special about this show now that could let us down a lot. But I'm actually super excited.
Are you ready to get let down?
This is the first Star Wars thing since I was a kid that I've actually genuinely been really excited about.
Yeah,
so
it feels fresh and new. And I think they're going to pour money into this thing because I think Disney's streaming service is going to be a major competitor against Star Wars. Just think pretty much 60% of what you watch is going to have to be accessed through this app.
Right, and they have to say that they're going to outdo Netflix, right? Because that's their whole thing is like, we don't need to be on Netflix. So Netflix is spending $8 billion a year, that's a real figure, on original content.
Yikes.
Disney's probably going to get close. I mean, Apple, even with their new streaming services, is already doing dollars around there. I think they're going to pump it with Game of Thrones money.
They also, I think when we were talking about the Marvel shows like the Loki and the Scarlet Witch and everything for the Disney app, you're like, how could they get that money? And then you hear these directors and you see like the production value immediately because they're already shooting the show. You're like, oh, never mind. I could easily get that and a couple other MCU actors, easy peasy. This app is going to blow our minds probably.
Let us know what you think about this show, and let's move on to some other interesting news that came out through rewatches this week, right? With AntMan and the Wasp. There's a new detail.
You guys were hitting us up a lot about this, and it's actually an Easter egg that we've talked about before on this channel, but we do want to revisit it because there's just a little bit more on it. But in AntMan and the Wasp, in the quantum realm, look at that. that's a tiny little city. Someone on Twitter pointed it out. But also specifically, they pointed out that it could kind of look like the tiny city in Avengers End Times. If you look that up, it's a 2010 comic. It's issue number
32.
Ooh, encyclopedia.
But we can throw out theories for what we think this is going to be. But actually, I know, Eric, you've covered this in previous videos.
Yeah,
so can you remind us what we've already kind of established?
This is from the new Blu-ray HD release, so we can see it in so much better detail now. At first, I would just see it and be like, is that just a blur? Or are we just like making shapes out of Rorschach ink blots? But
right.
so we did go into this a little bit in our breakdown. We made another video about like different areas. So in the Marvel comics, there's this part called the micro world or microverse, also known as Subatomica, and there's it's really one of these things to where it's like Stanley, like, what else are we gonna sell some comic books with?
That was a line of sugar.
Pixie sticks, come on. But it kind of starts with like the Fantastic Four characters, and with Doctor Doom shrinks them, and they go somewhere, and then like Ant-Man has to go save them, and they end up turning the tables on Doctor Doom, and he just disappears. But then later he shows back up. Apparently, all this time he was in Micro World. He like conquered this planet called Mirwood. There's all these interesting stuff. There's even at one point the Thing goes missing in the Subatomica universe, where like they find him. Scott Lang finds him later, where he's like a Thor Ragnarok style Hulk gladiator, and he's become the star. But it sounds like it's one of these things that just kind of exists because comics, right? Like it's not like there's any sacred protection over these stories. So I think the most interesting implication of it is that there could be another universe down where there are civilizations.
Right. Wow. Well, and the most practical application of this is Scott Lang uses this, right? He goes in there and he asks to use a payphone, and he calls out the Avengers, and then he gets rescued.
For sure. And I think one of the things I started to look at is...
Wait, are you saying they introduced that in the new Avengers? Oh my God, that'd be so like, oh wait, hold on, we have to grasp this now.
We're getting a tiny phone call.
We already have the raccoon who's just stealing stuff and building stuff.
In the SNL sketch.
Hello. Hello.
A little tiny phone. I think what we should look at this as, rather than just like a small universe, imagine if it's just like when Scott Lang was going between atoms, it opens up a portal to another realm. So what if there's a 10th realm, the way that they have the 9 realms of like the Thor universe, and it's just another realm? Because we know Stephen Strange went blasting through it as if it were just another dimension. So what if down in that city they just got a wormhole and you jump into it and you pop out on Sakaar or something? It's weird. If you look into theoretical physics, there's all these theories about like how inner space is governed by the same theoretical physics as outer space, and you could just drop in an Einstein-Rosen bridge. They just go through it, and then they aren't small anymore. They just pop out.
Make it sound so simple.
Yeah. Can we go back to the picture real quick? Because I also want to point out that there is a little more science here. Another Easter egg. If you look to the upper right corner of the circle, you'll see that there's a mosquito and amber. And I just connected the Jurassic Park universe to this right at this moment. Yeah, that's super obvious,
That's
right?
the thumbnail. Put it in.
Yeah, that's thumbnail. Put a tiny arrow on it.
Also, I'm a big fan. Mark Waid recently did an Ant-Man and the Wasp series with Scott Lang, and they didn't, for some reason, made a new Wasp, didn't name her Hope, they named her Nadia. So anyways, basically like based off the movie, they go to like subatomic micro world stuff, and they start playing with theoretical physics and particles, and they start acting like those particles. It's a very interesting story. Ant-Man 3, you should probably base it off that. It was a really good story.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a very interesting find. But what other big news came out this week?
Don't worry, I got you covered, because Zack Snyder confirmed on Vero, everyone's favorite social media platform, that he planned... Hold on to your hats, kids. He planned to kill off Batman in his version of the DCEU. But also we got some set photos that surfaced of Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio in Spider-Man Far From Home, and most Mysterio of all, he did not have his fishbowl helmet. Erik also did a whole video about this, so be sure to check that out. Also, fun fact for fans of Game of Thrones, Jon Snow's direwolf Ghost will be back for the final season with a fair amount of screen time, according to the VFX supervisor.
Nice.
Makes me excited as well. And finally, Black Mirror Season 5 will include a choose-your-own-adventure episode as Netflix tries to expand the usage of this feature. I did a little research. They tried this one time on a Puss in Boots animated show where you could choose the ending. So one episode's going to try it. I'm extremely interested to see what the options could possibly be. They're probably all going to be depressing.
Yeah. Well, and it definitely puts us as part of the Black Mirror story, and I feel like we're just like, that's it. Now we are going to die.
Yeah, it's the most Black Mirror thing you could do.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to some lightning round questions. You guys know how this works. You sent us some great questions. I'm going to fire them at my co-host. I got some questions for myself in here, too. We're going to have to answer them quickly, all right? So it's going to be a true lightning round, no hesitation whatsoever.
Buckle up.
Alrighty, here we go. First question for me, at Bruce Game Freak wants to know, do you think that the whole Disney-Fox merger will be complete by the time Avengers 4 comes out in 2019? Absolutely not. They shot that movie a year ago, and that deal wasn't going through. But, man, I wish they could. I'd love to have X-Men in that movie. Sam, at the Dragon Reborn. So with Chris Evans leaving Captain America role, who steps up as the next big lead?
I wouldn't mind to see Bucky hopping up there. But if we go with a new character, it's got to be our Black Panther, Captain Marvel, or Spider-Man.
Yeah. Lightning.
Filup. At Hato Potato. Oh, we know that person. If you and your fellow co-hosts were a superhero team, what would your team name be?
Fast.
Band name.
Threatening
spinal
3.
cord solution.
Our current channel name
Nude
would be a good start.
Rockstars.
Nude
What even is
Rockstars.
that?
Every
Nude
Rockstar, if you're doing it
Rockstars.
right. Sam, at the
Lightning.
real TK12 wants to know, if you could choose any pop culture weapon to take with you in battle, what weapon would you choose?
Portal gun.
Portal gun, great. Filup, at Joldsworth wants to know, quick, what rhymes with Kevin Feige?
Hyman Wipey.
Oh, that's great.
Put it on a shirt.
For me, at What Up Rob wants to know, which would you rather have? 1, a ridiculously small bladder causing you to go to the bathroom 3 times during any movie you see, or 2, only being allowed to sit in the front row of any movie you see. Oh, front row. Oh, I don't want to use the bathroom at all. I've almost wet my pants a couple times. I've gone all the way through others. Sam, at Dene B. Trix wants to know, what are you going to be for Halloween?
This is a surprise.
Surprise. Hold on your butts.
It's from The Office, and it's niche.
Oh. Filup, same person wants to know, what are you going to be for Halloween?
One of those lesbians from The Dark Knight Returns.
Sure, great. And
very spooky.
for me,
They're very scary.
at Sunday Duck, which is your favorite movie before 1970? Oh, 2001, Space Odyssey, 69. Every day.
Our name would be Heart Attack because we're coming at ya. Boom.
Yeah.
A lot of chest punches.
Team name. Yeah. Great. Thank you for all those questions. Hopefully we answered yours. And keep firing them at us every week. We're going to try to be more engaging and interactive with you guys. And we love hearing from you. Let's move on to our 15-second shout out where we get to shout out, plug, around about anything we want. Sam, do you got something?
Yes, I want to talk about Maniac. It's the limited series from Cary Fukunaga on Netflix, and it stars Jonah Hill and Emma Stone. The story is really interesting, and I like that it's kind of an unreliable narrator so far of what's happening. I'm only 2 episodes in, but so far the aesthetic is just there's a lot of like Stranger Things, how you kind of feel comfortable in the 80s aesthetic. The premise of this show is like something happened in the 90s, so everything looks like the 90s, and
cool.
It's not even like super like excited. I'm not excited about it, but it's something really soothing to watch, and I'm actually invested to see where this mystery goes. It doesn't feel very straightforward, so check it out.
Time.
And Filup, your 15 seconds.
I can finally say I kind of accidentally plugged it too early, but it wasn't up yet. On Scener, so go to scener.com/newrockstars. I have a Breaking Bad breakdown, but it's a super in-depth analysis. So if you're a super fan, I analyze the script. That pilot episode is one of the best designed pilots of all time. I explain why for an hour.
And you got to check that out because any breakdown I do here is just a poor imitation of what Phil's able to do when he breaks down stuff. So definitely go see it.
I'm a poor imitation of what Erik does.
We've just done dilution moving across the table here. For my 15 seconds, I want to shout out, I just tweeted it or retweeted it. The show Kidding on Netflix, the Jim Carrey show, they showed a behind the scenes take of how they did an amazing one take shot. And I'm all about those one take shots. I love Alfonso Cuarón because he always works one into every movie. But this one, they rotated the camera around where you just see him on TV and the time passes and they change the set around. They put a fly on the wall camera where you see and you hear the director cueing different people coming in. It looks fantastic. So I love showing how they come up with
cool.
practical ways to do interesting one take shots as opposed to CG one takes. Fast and Furious, you're not proving anything by doing that.
15 seconds.
15 seconds. All right, let's move on to our trivia answer to the question posed earlier. And this one was a tough one. We had a lot of different curious, interesting answers that I'm sure we'll get to. That's mine, and that's somehow got to yours. Okay, so just to remind us of what the question was, is in the comics there are 9 named symbiotes, including Venom. Name as many as you can. Now, let's start by actually naming all the ones that do exist. Okay, so first
Easy.
We have, including with Venom, so we have Venom, and then we have Agony, Phage, Lasher, Scream, and Riot. Those are the 5 Life Foundation ones. There's also Carnage, toxin, and anti-venom. Great. So how do we do?
All right, I'll start with Erik. Erik said Carnage, Riot, Phage?
Yep, that's one of them.
Yeah. Well, you just... What's that thing?
The ink skipped.
Okay. Scream,
Sure.
Lasher, Agony, Savage, Agent Venom.
So I know that's a comic series.
Weirdly,
Doesn't count.
and also Agent Orange.
Yeah, Agent Orange. So I got what? Including Venom. I got-
The judges are keeping an unfair track.
Okay.
It's going to be whatever they say.
Sam says Riot, Carnage, Venom, Anti-Venom, Toxin, and Shriek. So you got Toxin.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but only 6 answers.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're right, and that's important to know going into Philip's answers. Which,
I got
he has all 9, and he wrote all 9! Exclamation point. He wrote, here you go, guys. Count them down: Venom, Riot, Carnage, Simbi, Simba, Zazu, She-Riot, Kylo, Bechtold. That's
How could you guys forget him?
That's all 9.
It's a symbiote form of something else.
It explains so much.
All right, judges, who won and who?
I mean, that is all 9.
Erik got the most.
Okay, winner.
Erik did get the most correct. Yeah.
And then between Philip and Sam,
I got more.
I got 6, but Filup made up a bunch.
9, very
Kylo was-
specifically.
I got
Also,
6.
Philip lost last week.
He only got 3 that were right.
also Philip did lose last week.
Yeah, Filup lost last
Sam
week.
also included Kylo, the name of my dog.
Yeah. So yeah.
Sam was
I
Sam
think
is
the
a
audience
loser.
disagrees, but all
I can
right.
see the comments right now. So Sam's going to choose from our gift of shame bucket. He's going to have to read and do whatever is on this slip of paper, and then you guys will turn it into an animated GIF and
Yes.
put it. We'll turn it into an
And
animated
we'll
GIF. You can
feature
share
it.
and then we'll feature it. So swap out that green screen when so Sam can be anywhere you want him to be. It doesn't have to
Okay.
be what it is. So Sam, tell us what you got.
Act like there's an alien bursting out of your chest.
Oh wow, that's
Act
a fun one.
like it.
Act like it.
Don't really let that alien out.
Yeah.
Okay, so-
We already lost Maud.
No, she's like, oh my god. So here's what we'll do. I'll read the goodbyes. Sam will do this, and he's gonna look like a fool. So turn him into anything you want. Doesn't have to be an alien. That'd be too hard to pop out of a chest. Oh, look at him go.
Shame.
Okay, everyone. Shame. Thank you for watching this week's episode of New Rockstars News, and let us know your thoughts on Venom and all the other stuff that we talked about in the comments below. Let's thank our host Sam Bashor at Sam Bashor on Twitter. There's also me, Erik Voss at EA Voss on Twitter, and Philip Molina at Fimo on Twitter. Oh, look at that. Wow, you guys are really good with that. Current production somehow got post in real time. Wow. It's like we're on the set of The Mandalore. Comment down below and tweet us at New Rockstars. Like this video, share it around, subscribe to New Rockstars for the deep dives into all the stuff that you love. Goodbye, everyone.
It's damp and fair.
What show would end with that? Dinosaurs?